Donald Trump continues to extend his lead over the GOP field after a big win in the Nevada caucuses. Can Rubio and Cruz stop Trump on Super Tuesday? Editor-in-chief of CNS News, Terry Jeffrey, is here to break it all down. And later, a very special Storyented segment. She worked closely with legendary children's author Dr. Seuss. The president of beginner books at Random House, Cathy Goldsmith, is here to discuss the good doctor's legacy and his found manuscript topping the bestseller lists. And finally, the nation mourned the loss of Justice Antonin Scalia last week. Joining us to talk about the faithful side of the justice in an exclusive is his son, Father Paul Scalia. The World Over Live begins right now.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. Terry Jeffrey, Cathy Goldsmith, and Father Paul Scalia are all straight ahead. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show, or if you have a question, I'll be live tweeting throughout. You can find me on Twitter at Raymond Arroyo, or you can email me at worldover@EWTN.com. Let's get to it. Here's the brief news from the world over this week. It was the biggest win yet for Donald Trump. The political neophyte and now indisputable Republican presidential frontrunner took the Nevada caucuses with a whopping 46% of the vote. That outpaced Senators Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz combined. Rubio grabbed 24% of the vote. Cruz came in at 21%. On Super Tuesday, 12 states are in play. Trump leads in most of them, according to polls, save for Cruz's home state of Texas and neighboring Arkansas. On the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton is expected to win Saturday's South Carolina primary, and Vermont's Senator Bernie Sanders could be facing his last stand on Super Tuesday. Polls indicate that Clinton is in command in most of the 11 states up for grabs. Sanders will likely win his home state of Vermont and holds a small lead in Massachusetts. More on Trump's dominance Super Tuesday and the eminently important March primary calendar in our next segment. And it appears that Pope Francis has recovered from last week's presidential dust-up over immigration with Donald Trump. This week, the Holy Father received some rather high praise from Bernie Sanders. In an interview aired by Canada's Salt and Light Catholic television, Sanders was asked about being described as a socialist and whether he thought Pope Francis was also a socialist.
Well, what it means to be a socialist in the sense of what the Pope is talking about, what I'm talking about, is to say that we have got to do our best and live our lives in a way that alleviates human suffering, that does not accelerate the disparities of income and wealth.
Father Tom Rosica conducted the interview back in September. Interestingly enough, a day after the Sanders interview at his Wednesday audience, Pope Francis waded back into the political fray with comments strikingly similar to those of Sanders. The Pope rebuked the greedy and called for material justice and charity for the poor. Reflecting on the words of the Old Testament prophet Isaiah, he said, "The Lord warns against the greed of the wealthy landowners who want to accumulate more. Richness and power are realities that can be good and useful for the common good if they are put to service or the service of the poor and all. But when they become lived as privilege with ego and presumption, they are transformed into instruments of corruption and death." For emphasis, he added that Isaiah was no communist. And one thing for sure, Pope Francis is not shying away from political hot-button issues. During his Angelus address on Sunday, the Holy Father renewed his call for a global abolition of the death penalty. He said that all Christians of goodwill are called to work for its end, arguing that even a criminal has the right to life. The Pope urged Catholic political leaders to refrain from applying the death penalty during the year of mercy. And the Vatican has called for a criminal investigation into the death of the receptionist at the Santa Marta residence where Pope Francis lives. The body of Miriam Wulu, a 34-year-old Eritrean immigrant who was 7 months pregnant, was found in her apartment this past Friday. She had been absent for several days from work due to complications from severe diabetes. An initial investigation found no signs of violence, although the body was badly decomposed. An autopsy is planned. The woman's death has raised questions about her husband, who did not live with her. Investigators will also attempt to confirm the paternity of her unborn child. Vatican spokesman Father Federico Lombardi said Pope Francis was informed of the death and that, quote, "we are all pained by the news." Archbishop Terence Prendergast of Ottawa is instructing priests to deny the sacrament of the anointing of the sick to those planning assisted suicide. Archbishop Prendergast notes that the desire to end one's life shows that the individual lacks the proper disposition for the sacrament, since anointing includes absolution, and absolution cannot be given preemptively. The Archbishop is instead asking priests to pray for the person while attempting to dissuade him or her from the act. Last year, the Canadian Supreme Court ruled doctor-assisted suicide as legal. And last week, we told you about the amazing multi-million-dollar renovation of Bethlehem's Church of the Nativity. News has now surfaced that a mysterious religious artifact has been uncovered during the renovation. According to the Times of Israel, the artifact is made of brass, silver, shells, and stones. It was accidentally covered in plaster near a window. The head of the Christian Affairs for the Palestinian government said the artifact is of great historical and religious value, and it will be researched thoroughly before being released or put on display. What could it be? Sounds like the making of another Will Wilder adventure. And speaking of Will, I have to share something with you. On March 8th, Will Wilder, The Relic of Perilous Falls, my new middle grade book, crashes into bookstores everywhere. I recorded the audio book and did all the voices. Here's a little taste. All Will Wilder meant to do was ride the donkey at his 8-year-old brother's backyard birthday party. He didn't mean to hurt anyone. He didn't mean to unlock his destiny, and he certainly didn't mean to see the shadows. But that is exactly what happened. Life often came at Will while he was focused on something else. Will Wilder, The Relic of Perilous Falls, the first of the Will Wilder series, hits bookstores March 8th. But whether you want the hardcover or the audiobook, it's available now for pre-order at the EWTN Religious Catalog, Books A Million, Amazon, wherever books are sold. And if you pre-order and send me your contact info at raymond@raymondarroyo.com, I'll send you a limited edition autographed bookmark. I've also posted the early dates of my book tour. On March 8th, we'll have a kickoff event in Jacksonville, Florida. Then it's on to Corpus Christi, New Orleans, Milwaukee, Cleveland, Ohio, Athens, Georgia, and many more. I'm so excited to see you all and to share Will's great adventure with you and your families. And next Wednesday, I'll be at EWTN doing a special signing. So if you're in town in Birmingham, come see us. When we return, Donald Trump won big in Nevada this week. But will the momentum continue? Terry Jeffrey of CNS News joins us to discuss it all. The World Over continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over. Donald Trump is maintaining his front-runner status in the GOP race for president. He swept the Nevada caucuses earlier this week. Next stop, Super Tuesday. Will Trump's momentum continue, or will Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz challenge his dominance? Here to put it all in perspective, I'm joined by the editor-in-chief of CNS News, Terry Jeffrey. Terry,
hey, Ray,
thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start with two bites. This is Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. They're at rallies in Houston, and they took a decidedly different tack this week after weeks of hands-off Donald Trump. Watch.
We can't be fooled by P.T. Barnum.
The time for the clowns and the acrobats and the dancing bears has passed.
The front runner in this race, Donald Trump, has actually alluded to the fact that he thinks parts of Obamacare are pretty good. I can tell you, everybody running for president tells you, I want to get rid of Obamacare. I'm the only one that's ever done anything about it.
Should they have gone after Trump earlier?
Yes.
Is it too late?
Yes, I think they, in the press, I don't think it's too late. I don't think Trump has the nomination sewn up. But I think there's a serious question about how Donald Trump has arrived at the policy positions he has, particularly since the positions he has now are quite different from ones he had 10 years ago.
Well, he wasn't a public figure, though. He was a businessman.
Well, but he was flirting with running for president all the way
that's
back in 1999. He was positioning himself as the pro-partial birth abortion Donald Trump in 1999. Now he's the ostensibly pro-life Donald Trump. But for example, on that issue, Raymond, I've never seen a rational, systematic, logical argument out of this man of where his pro-life position came from and what the reasoning is behind it. I've not seen that. And it's not just a pro-life issue. I think that Donald Trump needs to be forced to explain himself in a rational way on all his policy positions, because I think the question that voters need to have about someone like Trump, who has never served in public office, is, can we trust this person to do, if he is elected, what he's saying now, particularly when he has a record of flip-flopping on so many issues?
In Nevada, he won 46% of the vote, Rubio 24, Cruz 21.
Right.
This is a rather remarkable turnabout in a state like Nevada. Now, granted, it is a caucus and not a primary, which is a different system, but still, 46% is pretty incredible.
Well, it is. I mean, there's no doubt that Donald Trump has a very powerful message. It appeals to a lot of Republican voters. I think it appeals to a lot of people outside the Republican Party. I think particularly what he said about border security and enforcing the immigration laws, what he said about trade, which is an issue the other Republican candidates
don't even mention,
aren't really talking about. And I also think the way he's positioned himself on foreign policy, where he doesn't want to advance an interventionist, nation-building foreign policy. I think Americans are generally with Trump on those issues, and I think probably the majority Republican primary voters are too.
We keep hearing the conversation that if Rubio or Cruz gets out of this race, the other guy will benefit and they can beat Trump. Do you agree with that math? Does that really work out?
Not necessarily, because I think that a lot of the people who are supporting Cruz probably are closer to Trump on the issues than they are to Rubio.
Right.
I think that basically Cruz is positioned very similarly to Trump on the issues. Marco Rubio is a little different, particularly on immigration, but also on foreign policy. And clearly Marco Rubio has definitely taken that interventionist. He's much more aggressive in terms of how the United States ought to assert itself, particularly, for example, in the Middle East than either Cruz or Trump. So I think it is possible that if Cruz dropped out, some of his support would go to Trump.
Yeah.
And if Trump's already in the 40s, there's a question of what happens there.
Yeah, that's my sense. I don't think it's a fait accompli that all those voters suddenly migrate to one or the other candidate. At best, he'll split them. At worst, for them, he'll take a majority of them. And the Cruz vote, I think most of those people are Tea Party evangelicals.
And the immigration issue is particularly important to many voters. And I think with Trump taking such a dramatic position, he's going to secure the border, he's going to enforce the immigration law, and Marco Rubio, having been a co-sponsor of the Gang of Eight, that's a real question.
That's a liability for Marco Rubio. Let's talk about Florida and Texas. If these candidates, Rubio and Cruz, lose their home states, can they progress? I want to put up the most recent polls, just so everybody can see this. Texas, this is the Real Clear Politics average of Texas. Cruz is at 33%, Trump is at 28%. Rubio 18, and the others afterward. Kasich 8, Carson 5. Then there's this Texas Emerson poll, Emerson University. Cruz is at 29%, Trump is at 28%. Can Trump close this gap?
Well, it's crucial for Ted Cruz to win Texas. Texas is his home state, and it's also a big group of delegates, and it's coming up on Tuesday.
Really his last firewall.
He needs to win Texas. And then we have, in the middle of March, Florida. And Rubio is going to have to win Florida. If they don't win those states, I don't see how they
That's
stop.
it, really.
I don't see how. If Trump has another big day on Tuesday, and that includes winning Texas, I think it changes everything. I think Cruz must win Texas.
In Florida, I'll put these polls up. Florida, Trump 40%, Cruz 19%, Rubio 14%.
Yeah.
That's the real clear politics average.
Well, you know, when Rubio got into the race, he said he wasn't going to run for the Senate again in Florida. So he put all his chips in. Without question, if Marco Rubio is still in this race in the middle of March, he needs to win Florida. And which means the Republicans need to have a serious debate on the issues. As I said, I don't think that Trump's thinking on these issues is clear. And I think a major question that people have about Trump is this guy simply taking this, is this a marketing campaign or is this a political campaign? Has this candidate figured out that there's certain issues that politicians in Washington won't talk about, or if they do talk about, they've acted in a different and hypocritical way, that he can capitalize on in this campaign when he may not have any real interest in carrying through on those if he's elected president, nor that he's actually thought through in a rational and systematic way in arriving at those positions. So I think it's crucial in the next 2 weeks for the other candidates to challenge him on those issues and for the media to challenge him on those issues.
What happens after Super Tuesday? Let's assume neither of these candidates, Cruz and Rubio, lose their home states. What happens?
Well, I think one thing you're going to see is that whoever emerges as the Republican nominee is going to be the target of a brutal onslaught by the liberal media. Yeah. The establishment media in this country is liberal. They do not want to see a Republican elected. They don't want to see someone elected who's arguing for the things that Donald Trump has argued. So if Trump is the nominee, what you're going to see is a brutal onslaught against Donald Trump. And there'll be not a commensurate onslaught against Hillary Clinton if she happens to be the Democratic nominee.
I want to play something for you while we speak of the Democratic nominees. This is Bernie Sanders in Nevada, advertising his anti-establishment credentials. Watch.
I think everyone knows taking on the establishment, whether it is the financial establishment, whether it is the political establishment, whether it is the media establishment, is not easy. We have come a very long way in 9 months.
How far will that take him?
Bernie Sanders?
Bernie Sanders, this anti-establishment.
Well, there's a certain power to it. In a way, he's doing from the left what Donald Trump is doing on the right. In some ways, they're talking about some of the same issues.
They are. They're touching the same voting, where the voters are anyway.
Right. And but I think he's got a tough road to beat Hillary Clinton for the Democratic nomination. I mean, he seemed to be fading in Nevada, and I think that. I don't see Bernie Sanders getting the nomination.
No, these numbers are brutal. Yeah. Clinton is 48.7 in Nevada. Sanders is 46.3, so that's close. Texas, she's at 61, he's at 32%. Florida, same scenario. Hillary Clinton's at 64%, Sanders at 25.
Yeah.
Give me a sense of where this investigation, and there are 3 concurrent investigations into Hillary Clinton and this email server. This judge recently said her aides should be sworn under oath. They should be questioned about whether they were out to thwart justice by creating this email server. Where does this go? Will she be indicted?
I don't know. I mean, you hear people who have a very serious understanding of this more than I do, who think she's got a real problem. And I do think that the inspector generals in both the intelligence community and the State Department have done an excellent job in looking into this. The inspector general of the intelligence community, Charles McCullough, sent a letter to members of Congress. He also sent it to the Clapper, the DNI, in which he said that representatives of 2 elements of the intelligence community provided sworn statements to his office saying that, among other things, that there were information and emails on Hillary Clinton's server that were derived from classified intelligence community sources. So that's a serious issue. Whether she gets indicted, I don't know, but there's obviously a
big liability for her. I need to return to Donald Trump. He's clearly making a play for religious voters this time out. He was at Pat Robertson's Regent University in Virginia the other day, and he addressed the Pope's recent critique of the Trump plan to build a wall at the border.
He was a little bit strong at first, sort of interesting, because it was the day before the election, right? And I said to myself, oh, no. And my people came up to me. They said, Mr. Trump, the Pope just made a big statement about you. I said, good or bad? I said, oh, this is a disaster. And it turned out to be that he talked about the border. And he did mention the wall, and then I said, the first thing I thought of, I said, but I've seen the Vatican. That's the most incredible wall. That wall goes up to that ceiling, right? I said, what about this? So I think he actually took a little heat. You know, nobody explained to him about the crime. Nobody explained to him about the drugs pouring across and the economy. And he was actually very nice.
Well,
What do you make of this?
first of all, I think Trump's bigger problem with people who take seriously the moral crisis in our country, and there is a moral crisis in this country, is where he actually stands on abortion and where he stands on marriage. Like I said, I haven't been thoroughly explored. He hasn't rationally explained himself. I think he needs to be forced to. On the question of the wall, I would say this. The first question I think for a Catholic ought to be, is this a just law? Is the border of the United States a just law, or is it an unjust law? I think it's clearly a just law. Not only do we have a right to have a border, but we are very compassionate and liberal, really, in the way we enforce that. We allow about 1 million legal immigrants in a year. We allow people in asylum status and refugee status if they fear persecution in their own countries. And I think that all that is good. So the question is building a effectively impermeable wall at the Mexican border a proportionate and discriminating way of enforcing a just law? And I would say it is. And in fact, I would say it's morally superior because it actually is going to protect human life. If we effectively are telling people who are trying to smuggle drugs, the cartels across the border, you're not getting across, that's going to help reduce the crime on the Mexican border communities, where there's incredible crime now because of the drug cartels. Also, if the drugs aren't coming across the people in our communities here in the United States that are being harmed by drugs coming from Mexico and drug criminals related to the Mexican cartels, that harm is going to be done. And then there's the attractive, the moral hazard of basically letting people know south of the border that they may be able to sneak across our border, Raymond, and therefore they can risk, or they're tempted to risk, that dangerous move across the desert where they may have to deal with human traffickers and where they may suffer a real tragedy in their life because of the conditions that they go through. So to me, building barriers at the border that deter people from trying to come across and stop people effectively from crossing illegally is a good thing because it is a proportionate and discriminate enforcement of a just law. So Trump is right about the policy on that one.
Let's figure out, quickly, we only have a minute left. Evangelicals in Nevada broke for Trump 41%. Cruz only got 27% of evangelicals.
Right.
As I talk to Catholics and evangelicals, I do scratch my head because here you've got a thrice married individual,
Right.
a man who, he drops all kinds of language from the pulpit and the podium. He's not the first instinctive candidate that you would expect evangelicals or faith-based people to run toward. Here's what they tell me. You know what? We've been hearing our co-religionists all these years tell us X, Y, and Z. We've voted for them, we've supported them, and they've either lost or they haven't given us what they promised. So we're going for Trump. It seems they're putting those social issues that you're raising on the back burner, willing to focus now on the economy, immigration, and trade, and that those issues are preeminent.
Yeah.
Where am I wrong?
Well, I think you're right. I think there's a powerful reaction to those issues, and I think there needs to be a more careful examination of the other issues. And as I see it, I think there's a crisis in our country that's coming, driven by both cultural and economic factors, and they're interwoven. And Donald Trump, if he's going to be our president, better have serious answers to them. And I'm not sure he's laid those out in this campaign.
We'll keep watching. Terry Jeffrey, thank you so much for being
Raymond.
here. As
Thank you,
always,
Raymond.
you can catch all of Terry's columns and analysis at cnsnews.com. Up next, she's the last person to have worked with the legendary Dr. Seuss. She art-directed his last 6 books. Cathy Goldsmith is here to talk about his legacy, his lost book, and answer your questions in our Storyented segment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
This is our Storyented segment where once a month we make a little time for literacy and fun. So on with the show. There's so much to say. My next guest has traveled to be here today. She joins us to talk about findings in boxes, about a doctor named Seuss and his wonderful goxes. She worked on 6 books with this doctor named Seuss. She's called Cathy Goldsmith. Now, let's set her loose. Welcome to the show, Cathy.
Thank you so much.
Great to see you.
Lovely introduction.
Well, I try my best. Now, Cathy is the president of Beginner Books and Dr. Seuss's longtime collaborator, and we're delighted to have you here. I want to start with how you first met Ted Geisel, his real name. How did you all first encounter each other, and what did you think of him when you met him?
Well, I was 28 years old at the time. I think he was in his early 70s. I was a senior designer at Random House, which is where I still am today, so I've been there quite a long time. And he came in with a book, as he often did. The office would get a call, and he would say, I'm coming to New York. And if you got that call, that meant there was a new book coming with him.
Wow. And what did you think? I mean, this is like, at that point, he had already established himself. Since the 50s, he'd been printing with Random House. He really founded this whole area of children's books. I mean, he popularized them in a way that nothing before had, right?
It's true. We often refer to Random House as the house that Seuss built, so,
right.
Or certainly the children's part of it anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so he was clearly the most famous person I'd ever met then, and remains that way today for me.
And what was he like one-on-one? He was something of an introvert.
Yes, he was, and he was rather formal when you first met him. My biggest issue when I first met him was I had no idea what to call him.
Oh, boy.
Because in the 70s, you didn't refer to somebody like that by their first name. You would call them Mr. But nobody called him Mr. Geisel, and nobody in the office called him Dr. Seuss, and so I just did not have any idea what to call him. Thankfully, he invited me to call him Ted and solved my problem.
And it stuck.
And it stuck.
Talk a little bit about the trajectory of this amazing career that Dr. Seuss had from, and to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street, to the book you worked with him on, Oh, the Places We'll Go, which was his final book. Tell me about that journey. Did he sort of complete the circle with those two books?
I think he did. He clearly intended Oh, the Places You'll Go to be a farewell. It grew out of a graduation speech he had given once years ago, and he elaborated more on the idea for the book. But I think, yes, I think he knew that it was the last thing he was liable to publish while he was alive.
And you really helped him complete that last book. He was very ill. He had set up, according to all the reports I read, he set up a bed in his studio, and...
Not really.
No?
Not really in the studio.
But nearby.
He was ill. And normally, as I said, he would come to New York with a book, and I think he was worried he wasn't going to finish this book. And so he actually called Jerry Harrison, who was then the head of the children's group, and said, can Cathy come to California? And it was like, of course, if you need Cathy, she'll come to California. So I went out to help him finish specking the colors for the book, because he had written the book and all the black line drawings were finished. And he was about, I'd say, 60%, maybe a little bit more, finished with the color on it.
And the color and the layout was very important to him.
Always important. Well, first of all, color is, I learned everything I know about color from him practically. Because his color is like nobody else's. He uses colors together nobody would ever dream of, and he's not afraid of a lot of color, but he's also not afraid of white space on the page either.
Right.
Today we tend to fill every bit of space. We don't waste anything, but he knew when to leave your eye some place to rest.
Right. No, and it's beautiful. And the layout, it made me go back and look at the layout, and your eyes are drawn to the text as you move, and then to the adjacent pictures. And I imagine he spent a lot of time designing.
He spent a lot of time on it. And I actually learned about eye movement from him. And I realized that it's actually a science that they teach when you, for example, work at a newspaper. You always read the headline is always at the top.
Left and
the
right,
most important story is at the right, because you read over to here, and then you read here, and then you read. And he knew all those things, and I never knew about them till I worked with him. So,
tell me, what did you think when you got a call not too long ago from his widow, Audrey, that she had discovered a manuscript? You thought what?
Well, she didn't actually say a manuscript when she called. What I learned was that she had discovered a box that she thought Random House would be interested in.
Oh, so you didn't know what was in it?
Well, I mean, we assumed that it had a manuscript. You know, we didn't think it had dishes in it, you know.
Well,
so.
You never know. Money.
One never knows.
Yeah.
So I literally went running down the hall to my boss's office, our publisher, and said, we're going to California. They found a box. And literally like 3 business days later, I think, we were on the plane to California.
Huh. And what it was there? You had a manuscript, black and white drawings, completed. with the text, and we'll put a picture up, the text was sort of taped in.
Well, that's the way Dr. Seuss, Ted, worked. He would actually type up the type on a typewriter in those days, and he would cut it out, and he would tape it right on the page where he wanted it to be. So if he wanted it up, it would be up. If he wanted it down, it would be down. And as he would work on it, he would tape revisions one on top of each other. So.
And how did you determine, A, the pedigree and age of this work, and B, what did you have to do to put it together? Was it a complete manuscript, or were there missing elements?
Well, when we first saw it, we thought it was complete, but we didn't see it. We didn't have very much time with it the first day we saw it. The materials were already slated to move from Audrey Geisel's house into the Dr. Seuss archives at the University of California, San Diego. So the truck was literally in the driveway the day we were there. So we saw it briefly. We thought it was probably a full book, but we didn't absolutely know until a little bit later on when we got our hands back on it again. For me, I knew what it was as soon as I saw it. I mean, first of all, I would not assume somebody broke into Dr. Seuss's house and put fake Dr. Seuss there. But it was so clear to me that it was not only his work, but when it was from. I mean, I knew as soon as I saw the two children in the book that it was from the time period of One Fish, Two Fish. It's the only time he drew children that looked like that. And in point of fact, they are exactly the same children.
They're the same children.
They're the same children.
And he didn't like to draw children.
No, he did not.
Why?
He didn't think he did it very well. And I love those children. I think they're absolutely
adorable.
perfect. So.
Yeah, and they do. It's kind of like revisiting old friends. When I looked at it, I said, "Oh my gosh, I know these kids."
And that's just what I said. I said, "Oh my gosh, I knew exactly who they were."
What's your favorite book and why? You know, on Storyented, we always, our motto is, find your story, find your way. And we talk about the lessons you draw from these works. What's your favorite? What lesson did you derive from it?
Okay, I have two favorites, actually.
Okay.
I would say Oh, the Places You'll Go, because it was the one that I worked most closely with Dr. Seuss on. So it has a very special place in my heart for that reason. But I also love Happy Birthday to You. And I love it because of the message in it. There's a line that says, "There is no one alive who is youer than you." I love that. What a wonderful thing for children to learn, that they are unique, that they are special simply because who they are, that nobody is the same person that they are. I love that message.
It reminds me of the Horton Hears a Who. You know, a person is a person, no matter how small. Precious. We had some emails that we've been getting since I announced that you were on the show. A child wrote in, Tim from Clearwater. He's 8. So his mother must have typed. Why did he call himself Dr. Seuss when his name was Theodor Geisel?
Well, Seuss is his middle name, actually. It was his mother's maiden name, okay? So he is Theodor Seuss Geisel. And the doctor was something he picked up when he was in college, and he was doing cartoons for the college newspaper. He just did it as a lark.
Someone else, Nancy from Philadelphia, asks, why did Dr. Seuss draw so many weird, fantastic creatures, and what were his inspirations? You must know.
Well, I think he always has loved to doodle. There are notebooks of his doodles from the time he was young in the archives at UCSD. So I think that was something he's always done. And I think that's just the way he saw the universe and how he documented it.
He did a lot of political cartoons and things before children's books.
Absolutely. During the war, yes. Also during the war, he was actually, in the Army, he was part of the film crew that was headed by Frank Capra.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, he did. And they made movies for the Army about how to avoid certain situations you would get yourself into and how to be safe while you were a soldier, etc.
Cathy, why did he write in rhymes, in those little couplets? Why?
I think he knew instinctively that children can listen and remember those. We call them riffs very often in the office, and we like them because kids remember them, and then they pick up the book and they say, "Listen, Mom, I can read it." And they're really not reading it, they remember it, but we don't mind because what it says is that they love the book and that they think that reading is easy. So I think he thought of it as a way to get a foot in the door to a child who maybe didn't read yet and was looking to read.
What would be your advice to parents to help their children read, to inspire that lifelong love of learning and reading that I think we're all hoping for?
We all hope that parents will start their children with books early and that they'll share them with them, because I think any child who sees a parent loving a book is going to love a book themselves. I still loved, having a kid sit on your lap and read a book. To this day, I love when I go on a bus or on an airplane and I see somebody else's kid with their head in one of our books. I love that.
Why do you think these books have such an emotional hold on us?
Oh, because we remember them from our own childhood.
Yeah, but there's something about them, though. The first time you see them, I don't know if it's the vibrancy, I don't know if it's the characters, maybe it's the rhyme, but there's something, it transports all of us maybe because
I think they're unique. First of all, I think they're non-threatening. They have a sense of humor. They don't take themselves too seriously, and they don't talk down to children.
Good point. They don't, and you don't either. Cathy
Thank you
Goldsmith,
so much.
thank you so
It's been
much
a
for being
pleasure.
here, for all you do. Such beautiful work. What Pet Should I Get? Dr. Seuss's most recent book is available everywhere, and it's back on the bestseller list. It's really a fun read. My daughter keeps asking, what pet did they get? What pet did they get? Read it and find out. When we return, Father Paul Scalia will react to the loss of his father, Justice Antonin Scalia, and we'll ask him to address those lingering questions about the circumstances of his father's passing. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
God blessed Dad, as is well known, with a love for his country. Dad understood that the deeper he went in his Catholic faith, the better a citizen and public servant he became. God blessed him with the desire to be the country's good servant because he was God's first.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. Last week, the country mourned the loss of Justice Antonin Scalia. On Saturday, Justice Scalia's funeral mass was held at the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception here in D.C., and it was presided over not by the Archbishop of Washington, but as you heard, by his son, Father Paul Scalia. And I can't imagine a tougher assignment for any priest. Father Paul joins us to reflect on his loss, on his beloved dad, and to discuss Justice Scalia's legacy beyond his term on the court. Great to see you, Father. Thank you for being here, and our condolences. So many of our audience, I know, we're praying with you, and
we certainly felt that.
Yeah, no, it was an amazing, beautiful event to be a part of. But the prayer of that Mass, the way it was conducted, from the music to your homily to the liturgy, just. I know your father was smiling, and I shared a pew many times with him, and he was not one that liked the kind of loosey-goosey liturgy, so he would have loved this.
No.
Yeah.
Well, it's really, in many ways, a tribute to the mystical body of Christ, because it is the prayers of the people of God that I certainly felt helped me get through it. Yeah. But then also just the liturgy of the church and the instructions that the church gives us what a funeral should be. I mean, that's, follow the directions, right?
Yeah, right. You certainly did. I want to play, there was a little moment here where you talked about your father's faith and his love of the liturgy. I want to play that and get your reflections. He said this.
He loved the clarity and coherence of the church's teachings. He treasured the church's ceremonies, especially the beauty of her ancient worship. He trusted the power of her sacraments as the means of salvation, as Christ working within him for his salvation.
Tell me about your father's faith. I mean, you mentioned in there the ancient worship of the church. Unpack that bit of it.
Yeah, he was very devoted to the extraordinary form, as we call it now, and loved the Latin in the liturgy and just the ancient rites, and he loved as I said in the homily, just the clarity of her teachings and the coherence, the tightness of the church's doctrine, and something you could really sink your teeth into and never exhaust it all.
Now, he was always very careful, despite the fact that he was very clear about what he believed, spoke about it many times in various settings. You'll remember, so many times I approached your father and said, can we do an interview? Would you do the sit down? And he always begged me off because he didn't want people confusing his personal faith with his approach to the law.
He didn't like to be called a Catholic judge or jurist. because that flies in the face of everything that he believed about his jurisprudence, which was that he was to set aside his own beliefs and opinions and simply apply what had been entrusted to him.
But yet he was profoundly Catholic, and I think the greatest exemplar of his Catholicity was his devotion to the Constitution and the way he interpreted it, often going in ways and surprising people with his opinions, because they took him down paths that were unpredictable.
Well, I think it's a matter of integrity, and just having the integrity to say, well, this might get me to a place that I don't want to be.
Necessarily want to go,
but I've been asked to interpret this document, not another one.
I have to ask you something. As I watched from the pew during the funeral mass, I kept thinking, because I had tears running down my face. So many people around me. I mean, these are politicians. You know, you got lawyers in the room, people not exactly who wear their feelings on their sleeves. There was not a dry eye during most of that funeral. How did you maintain your composure through?
Well, again, that's a tribute to the many prayers that I know were offered for my dad, for my family, for me. And also just, I really a great grace to be able to offer my father's funeral mass and to preach it. I don't think there's any greater gift that a son could give his father. You know, my father, gave me life, and this is a way that I can, lay down my life in order for him to have eternal life. So it's that exchange of gifts, right? And so I just at one point just realized this is a tremendous gift that I get to do this.
Yeah, no, it was, for those of us watching, for those of us who knew the family, who knew your dad, it was, and to see all your nieces and nephews, so many beautiful family, and their reaction to, the entirety of the Mass. But then when you and the casket left the church, I mean, it was just one of those moments. There are rare occasions in this capital city where I can say, you see a faith lived out and in bold colors.
Well, thanks be to God that was conveyed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, that things aren't perfect, right? But we are people trying to live by the faith.
Well, you said something in your homily that illuminates this, and I want you to reflect on this a little more. But roll this moment in the homily.
We are here then, as he would want, to pray for God's inexplicable mercy to a sinner, to this sinner, Antonin Scalia. Let us not show him a false love and allow our admiration to deprive him of our prayers.
You underscored that point, that this is not just a commemoration dinner or a feel-good affair. This is a funeral mass for somebody's soul.
Which is just the Catholic understanding of the funeral mass. And more directly for me, I mean, my father would be livid. he would be livid if I had done otherwise, and I wouldn't want to do any otherwise. Not only because he would be angry about it, but because this is our understanding of death and of praying for the dead and what the funeral mass is all about. I mean, and I think something that I know I experienced was praying for him and giving him the proper funeral rites brought great peace. And I think a lot of times in funerals, people want to jump to the peace,
right?
And not realize, no, that is a result of the proper mourning and the proper praying for the person's soul and acknowledging the gifts that the person had received, but also the limitations that the person had and the failures,
Well, I love that you were willing to point out some of those. He forgot your names,
that's not a moral failing.
No, that's not. That's not. But your brother has wrote a piece just after your father's passing, and it's something, boy, did it convict me, and it's something I kept thinking about. When you are in the public eye, when you are someone who makes their living in your head, you do have to cloister yourself away. What was that like growing up? Your brother said, I can remember him behind the doors in the office, with his headphones on, doing his thing.
So that brother is, what is he, 7 years younger than I am, or 8? So he remembers one house that we lived in, and I remember those same things. I remember Dad going into his study and just, sort of hunkering down. But I remember when we lived in Chicago and he was teaching at the University of Chicago Law School, that his study was really sort of a reverential place. It was that's Dad's in there working, and there was a sense there that's that's tough stuff that he's engaged in. It's not he's not just pushing papers. He's really applying his mind to something.
But it's hard on the family because you're deprived of their presence a little bit.
Yeah, for a time, but I think that's probably true in any family to some degree or another.
Yeah.
And there are times, I think, with any family we were happy for his presence, and of course other times we wanted to be deprived of his presence, right?
No, don't tell my kids that, but that's true, of course.
Right, your family accepted, I'm sure.
No. When I come to the door, they go, "Oh, you're here." Oh, it's
right.
I mean,
and that's the thing. It's like any other family. Like you have all of those things going on.
No, you all handled it with such grace, and I think it was such an example, not only to Catholics, but to all people, of a family mourning in public for a great public witness, which your father was. So many people have talked about his legacy, and I want to talk about that in a moment, but I have to ask you this. We've been getting emails since his passing. Why didn't the family demand a toxicology report?
Right.
Why didn't you demand an autopsy? You could have done that. You didn't. There are all these wild conspiracy theories out there.
Yeah, and those are such a distraction, and they're just not helpful at all. They're a distraction at best.
He was in poor health.
Well, he had a lot of he had health problems, right? And he was also the kind of guy that, like a lot of men, probably wasn't addressing them and being as attentive to them as he should have been.
Like a lot of Italian men.
Well, that's probably right. Yeah. So all these conspiracy theories, it just, I don't really think that there's anything to them at all. And the family, we never gave it a second thought, because it was just so clear to us that.
Well, some have said the public, because he served on the court, the public should have been furnished with a definitive answer of the cause of death. Do you think that's not the case?
Well, I think when the man is 79 years old, and there was a press conference yesterday in which they sort of divulged some of his health concerns.
Yes.
When that's the case, I don't think you need to keep digging. And I think there's also a certain courtesy that is owed to the family, that you just kind of back off and let the family have its grief. And yes, he was a public servant, but he was a husband and father first.
I like that. Let's finally wrap up with his legacy. So many people have talked about his role on the court, the vanguard of originalism.
Right.
Your thoughts on his legacy as his son and as a priest?
Well, I mean, for me as his son, his legacy is gonna be much more personal, much more intimate, and just.
And what would that be?
Granting to me, I mean, and each child is different, obviously, but I think what I really received from him that I treasure is that same love for the church's teachings, their clarity, their coherence, their power to save. And we call it saving doctrine for a reason. And the love for the liturgy. I mean, I often would see him just moved by the liturgy. When it was good, moved in a good way. When it was bad, moved in a bad way.
I saw that too.
But so for me, that's great legacy. Personally, I think for the nation, there's the legacy in the jurisprudence, and I'll let the lawyers speak to that. But I think also just that he was not afraid to be known as a man of faith. I know made a great difference in the lives of a lot of Catholics and non-Catholics, and they respected that. And I think that set a good tone, and I think that's a great legacy as well.
Father Paul Scalia, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ray.
Our condolences to you,
so
to
much.
the family,
and
to your mother,
thank
Maureen.
you to all your viewers for their prayers.
They were deeply touched. It was a beautiful mass, and our thoughts and prayers are with you all.
Thank you so much.
Loss. Well, that is all the time we have for now. Until next week, the show continues on Facebook, on Twitter. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. The links are at RaymondArroyo.com. You can also go there for all the Will Wilder book tour dates. I better see you all when I'm traveling. If I have to sign alone, it'll be really ugly. Don't miss our show next week. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thanks for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. Bye now.